Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. And today is one of those days where I am honored to be having this conversation with the three founders of the College Equity Index, something I knew nothing about a short time ago. And someone brought it to my attention and said, you should have these women on. And as I dug into what's going on, I cannot believe what you are doing and how you are highlighting for people who don't know anything about this, how the world can look so differently in college for a white person going to college and a Black person going to college. Anyway, let me introduce you. So Dr. Deborah Felix is a former director of admissions at Columbia University and executive director of Felix Education Consulting and this. So your plate is full for all three of you. Dr. Monica Randall is the founding principal of Bridge to College Consulting. And Cindy Montgomery, who is also a lawyer, I'm also a lawyer, and took a different path. We probably are the happiest lawyers out there, is the founder of S. Montgomery Admissions Consulting. So as we get started, like one of you just jump in and tell me, what is the College Equity Index?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to just jump in. So the College Equity Index, it synthesizes quantitative and qualitative data about each institution through data collection, analysis, and substantive interviews. Really what it is at its core is an attempt to evaluate the access and affordability, diversity, campus climate, and outcomes for Black students in an easy to digest format. The index really takes a look beyond the things that you might find in other rankings like US News and World Report or other things that take a 30,000-foot view and look at the school as a whole. We think that sometimes that data, your school's graduation rate could be 98, 99%, but your school's Black graduation data could be completely different. And so we want to look at the climate and the outcomes specifically of Black students, because they do often have a completely different experience that's overshadowed.
So tell me why, though. Why this index? Like, was there nothing out there beforehand that, addressed this, or did we think that it wasn't necessary and now all of a sudden it is?
Yeah, there wasn't anything. I was looking last July for information about the racial climate on different campuses for a Black student I was working with, and I couldn't find anything. I found an equity index the New York Times did, but it was really not terribly helpful. And I found that another educational consultant had done a little list of schools that he felt were good for Black students. And I contacted him and I said, how did you come up with this list? And he said, I just asked a few other educational consultants what they thought. And these were the schools they mentioned. And the list didn't make any sense to me. It was like 10 schools that I just didn't think were probably really very good for Black students. And so I looked online. I looked everywhere for information and credible lists and things like that. And I couldn't find anything.
Well, tell us, like, have you ever gone back to the list that he gave you and checked it? No?
No.
Just curious.
No.
Okay, so Monica, can you tell us how did you evaluate? Like, this is you're starting from nowhere and you're creating the rubric on your own. So how did you come up with criteria that you were going to look at?
Oh, great. Yeah, we came up with 19 criteria. And we started out Deb and I started out meeting, and we just brainstormed on what are some of the things that we had questions about. And based on that, questions about diversity, questions about outcomes, questions that we felt in order for students to feel that they're valued, supported, developed, celebrated, what were important determinants of that. So we came up with these 19 criteria, factors that you would take into consideration, like if a student, if you're looking at student persistence, for example, or like an outcome, those kind of things. So we just came up with 19 criteria, looked at a number of different sources for data. Some data sources we actually had to purchase, other were things that were based on things like IPEDS, federal data that we were able to incorporate into the index. So that's what we did. I mean, we just sat down and said, okay, what's important for our students, Black students, when you're looking at campus environment? How do they feel? How do we make sure they feel valued, supported, developed, etc.? And these are the things we felt were important for students.
Are they in any priority order? Like, could you give us the top 5 that you think are the most important?
So the top 5 that are the most important.
Well, yeah, diversity was the first.
Diversity was an important one for us. So we looked at, our sources were access and affordability. Okay, so we looked at things like Black presence of Black professionals, the presence of Black professionals, the presence of Black deans. We also looked at the admissions deadlines for schools. Where did it fall? Was it before, like in December, or did they have a regular admission after January? Because we felt that was more accessible to students.
Can you tell us why does that matter? I don't know why that matters.
For some students, I felt that for some students, there's this big push for, early action or early decision.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily a good thing for everyone.
Yeah.
So if you're really wanting to open it up to access for students, having regular decisions after January 15th, we felt would be one thing. Okay. We also looked at diversity, like percentage of Black students, which was very, as well as underrepresented minority students, percentage of Black faculty. That's something that we looked at as well. Of course, we looked at campus climate, like spiritual development, how engaging the campus was, how friendships were developed, how students felt about that. Is something that we looked at. And then, of course, we looked at outcomes. Like we looked at the differences between graduation rates of Black students and non-underrepresented minorities. We looked at overall return on investment for the school as well, and looked at some rankings there. So those are some of the examples we did.
So when I hear those things you're talking about, to me, I feel like, well, how did you get that information? Like, it seems so hard to quantify, someone's campus climate experience.
Well, the like spiritual development and friendship development and career development and return on investment, that data all came from a study that was done by a group called the Alumni Factor. And they interviewed, I think they sent a survey to just thousands of alumni of selective colleges. And got that data back. They quantified it for us. All this data that we used was collected by somebody else. And they hopefully knew what they were doing. They seemed to. And some of it's from like the Education Trust and Department of Education data. Chronicle of Higher Education data was what we used for the minority faculty, because they're the only ones that have actually collected good data on the number of minority faculty on different campuses. And fortunately for us, they did that. They presented that data last November and for sale, and we purchased it.
Okay, so this is all like, how did you set this whole thing up? Now tell me, when you put this together, what was the biggest surprise when you were looking at the different information that was coming at you, where you just, some of it you went in with a predisposition of like, I know how this is going to play out. What were the big surprises?
I think that, and we can all kind of speak to this, I know that we all feel similarly. One of the biggest things was that nothing or not a lot has really changed. And I know I'm the most recent graduated from Princeton in 2015, so not too long ago, but the persistence of some of the issues, like one of the schools compared a list of kind of asks that they had at the administration to a list that was done in the 60s, and it was almost identical, right? And so the same issues have been happening.
Say what that is. I'm not sure I'm understanding what that is.
So, a Black student group had put together a list of asks for the administration, things that they felt would make the campus better, things that they felt they needed as Black students to feel supported. And it's the same kind of things that students were asking for in the 60s, like from 1968, right? And so when you think about that, it really just really drives home how important it is for colleges to be paying attention, hopefully, to the work that we're doing and also the voices of the Black students on campus, because there shouldn't be the same exact issues over 40 years. We should have some progress, and in some spaces and at some schools the progress has been very slow. And then I think it's also eye-opening to see that it's not just coming from administration, but it's also racism coming from professors. It's racism coming from their own peers. I think sometimes we have this notion that Gen Z is all kumbaya and they don't have any of these issues. But the reality is a lot of these microaggressions and macroaggressions, all of which are racism and all of which do have detrimental mental and social effects, there are a lot of them being perpetrated by students of their own age, right? So I think it's just eye-opening to see, or to be reminded, I guess, of how far we haven't come in a lot of respects.
So I don't want to put you on the spot. So if you don't feel comfortable with this, but like what your experience in college and what you saw on that list, was there something that jumped out at you as like, oh my God, I cannot believe it's still going on?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I mean, I think it's hard. When I was in college, I know that there were some of the things that we read, like we read a lot of Black at Instagram data. So there's a lot of anecdotal stories. And I would say that, when I was at Princeton, there are some real key moments that stick out to me, right? My first month, I think, at school, one of my friends, referred to me and my roommate as, like colored girls, which was, he didn't even know what he didn't mean it in any way. He was just like, oh, you guys are, you're pretty for colored girls. And he thought it was a compliment, and that really stung. And I know that I struggled with that at Princeton, like guys being like, oh, you're cute for a Black girl, but I can never bring you home, or, like this is never going to be serious, and that sort of thing, or people asking to touch your hair, or feeling like you have to be the symbol for basically all good, smart Black girls on campus. And so when I was reading a lot of those Instagram things, it was very reminiscent. And I think also just of, professors not feeling like you belong in a certain major. Like I remember reading from a certain school that, professor was discouraging students in that program. And I know for me, I really struggled with the dance program at Princeton, and I ended up not getting the dance certificate at Princeton because it was just such a hostile environment by one person who was kind of in head of the department. She made it very clear that she didn't think that I was going to be successful, that she didn't feel like remembering my name either, even though there was only 2 Black girls. And she tried to actually downgrade me from a level 300 dance class to a level 100 dance class after I had passed the level 300 dance class. So, just instances like that when I think it's definitely still going on.
Wow. All right, Monica, biggest surprise?
2 things. One was, and still is, the small number of Black students enrolled at highly selective private colleges and universities. It's low. I mean, we had to come up with, criteria, and we looked at schools that were as low as 3%. The highest school was 11.6% among non-HBCUs, so non-historically Black colleges and universities. And that to me is very low. I assumed that the percentage would be a lot higher than that, and it is not. The second thing that was it was surprising. It's surprising from the standpoint, just like Sydney said, that the stories continue, the same stories that I had. It mirrored my own experience. And I was an undergraduate a long, long time ago. And it shocked me that these students today, the Black students today, were experiencing the exact same things that I had experienced way back in the 80s. You would think that those microaggressions wouldn't be there today, but they are, and no different. There were a few times where I actually had to stop reading the Black at Instagram data because it was getting too personal I was seeing myself and seeing the same things happen to me. For example, I'll give an example of, professors saying you couldn't possibly have written this paper because you're not smart enough to do that. I had that happen a few times to me as well, and students report those kind of things as well. So just those kind of things happening today. Here we are in at the point we were looking at the data, it was 2020. And the same things happening today was just, it's heartbreaking and, a shock for me.
Wow. All right, Deborah.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I'm white, so I didn't have all that happen to me when I was a college student. So for me, the big surprise was that all this was going on. I didn't know. I didn't realize that it was so bad. I was just shocked by mostly the Instagram reports that we read.
Tell us the name. What is the name of that account?
So, on Instagram, if you you go to Instagram and you type in Black at Harvard, Black at Ivy, Black at Barnard, whatever, you'll get posts from usually current students, but also some recent alumni of those colleges about their experiences. And I too had to stop reading them after a point because it's just so emotionally draining and just awful. And I co-opted a couple of my friends who live in the next town from me to help us comb through those and, sort them out. And we just sorted them out into groups of, who was perpetrating this thing. Was it a professor, an administrator, a peer, somebody in town, an employer on campus, whatever. Another thing that really surprised me was not only how powerful those were and how awful they were, but how difficult it is to add that to an index, how difficult it is to summarize that, and be able to bring that information in a digestible way to a student who might be considering going to that college. It's not quantitative data, but it's really, really important to have if you want to have an idea what it's really like to be on that campus.
So I have two thoughts. One is go check out where can people go to get the College Equity Index, because it is actually a formal report that you can look at, and it's really well done. You don't have to be a scientist to read it. It's got information that you can use immediately. So where does someone go to get that?
You can go right to collegeequityfirst.org. You'll see, or collegeequityfirst.org/college-equity-index. You'll be able to get the download there, and it will have not just the overall rankings of the schools. We ranked 105 schools, private schools, but it'll also have a breakdown ranking in 4 different subcategories: at access and affordability, diversity, campus climate, and kind of outcomes. So you'll be able to see not just where the school ranked overall, but how they do vis-a-vis certain categories and features.
So get that, take a look at that. And also, I would say that for many kids who aren't Black, this should be something that you look at because you want to go to a school that treats people better. So I would say that, it is not just for Black kids trying to decide where to go. And also, do you feel like going to Instagram, if you're looking at a particular school and doing the school at is a valuable exercise for kids looking at colleges right now?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They can go to Black at and the school. They can go to, sometimes it's people of color at and the school name. If they play around a little bit, they'll find a lot of good postings
from the kids. So you're really hearing immediately what is the culture like on that campus.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I want to ask you, what is the reaction to your work from colleges? Because you really get a grade. So, it's if you have trust in the process, which you 3 seem pretty bright and meticulous about your work, you should have trust in the process, then you'd have to walk away and say, so what do we do differently? How's that been since you came out with your index?
Monica.
Oh, so I heard from one. We heard from one school, but it was a school that did very well, and it was someone who used to work at this school and talked about how proud she was of the work that they had done when it came to diversity, which was really nice. It was kind of a validation of
Nice, but one.
But it was one. Okay, yeah. The rest, not a word. Haven't heard anything. It's primarily we're hearing from parents who might have students who are looking at schools, both Black and white families, other advisors, other consultants, but not from the colleges, other than that one that I heard from.
And are you guys planning on reaching out at all and trying, there is probably a equity, diversity, inclusion person there, right? So are you thinking of taking this and being more directed in your approach?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's possible that they really haven't even seen it yet. And that's why we haven't heard any feedback from them. So yeah, we do intend to try and get it out there more broadly. We actually wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times last week, but I don't think it was printed. So we might write an op-ed for the Washington Post and see if that gets printed. If that fails, we might, we're planning to go to all of these schools and distribute a survey with, I think it's our 17 questions that we have at this point for current Black students to answer for us. In doing so, once we approach all of these schools to find students who will fill out this survey for us, hopefully they will also take this information to the diversity person or the admissions people or, the president. So that'll be our way of getting into all of these colleges and universities, making sure that they see it and that they care about it. For me, this is really important. I feel like one of our biggest probably impacts that we might have is to get these colleges and universities to wake up to the fact that things are really bad on their campus and do something about it, and maybe even compete against each other to get a better grade the next time.
Yeah,
we do this.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking an award would be great, or a starburst or whatever you call it, like when you can put it on your website that you have been awarded this, we are good or doing better or whatever. Just somehow, you have to. Yeah, you got to make it newsworthy, right? Like you have to be able to do something where you have a big announcement to say, like, there's change in the air.
Yeah. We're also planning on hopefully next year in our next iteration doing the 50 public flagship schools. So right now this index is just focused on private schools. But we do want it to be something that even public schools, making it appropriate for the fact that there are differences between public and private schools, but that they're not just off the hook either. And that this is something that really they can work towards. And we don't want it only to be like, okay, well, my school got a D or an F, although, you should really look at yourself and look inwardly at that, but also say, well, okay, our peer institution got a B. What is it that they're doing that we're not doing? How can we look, and using each other as, as Deb was saying, competition, but also just as inspiration, saying, oh, maybe this one change here can make a really big impact.
So the report doesn't feel punitive. It feels aspirational. Like, we've done the work for you and this is where you're falling short. So now put some money and attention to that.
Yeah. We even put, I think, 5 or 6 suggestions on the website for colleges and universities of things that they can do today to make a difference.
Tell us one of them.
Well, they can teach everybody on campus to make decisions based on thinking ahead of time about the impact of their decision on Black students. So, for example, if they're trying to, if they want to have more students with international experience or international living experiences, and they're telling admissions, get more kids into this program with international experience. Well, think about how that will affect your Black applicants. How many of them are going to have lived in Japan or France or, anywhere. So it's that kind of thing. It's really easy and it's free. But I don't think people do that right now. I mean, I've worked at a bunch of different universities and they don't take the time to really deliberately think through the unintended consequences of every decision they make. Right now, a lot of these schools are financially strapped because of COVID. And they're cutting departments and they're cutting teams. When you go to make that decision, which team do you cut? Do you cut a team that tends to attract Black students, or do you cut a team that tends to attract white students? Think about that.
And I will say, one of my really good friends, Russell Dinkins, we went to Princeton together. He ran track at Princeton and still is very competitive. He's actually been spearheading an effort to save Black men's track teams at several schools. The most recent one was Clemson. But really making a push because, like Debs was saying, those were the teams that were on the cutting block when COVID came around. And he has really pushed and advocated and written articles that have gotten picked up about the importance of keeping the track teams for Black men and Black students and for women as well, but that these teams are important and they're important vehicles for upward mobility and for for the development of these students as well.
Yeah, cut the golf team. It's a lot more expensive,
All right, Monica, you get the last word.
I get the last word. I think that one reason why I joined Deb and Sydney in doing this is how important I think it is to really look at campus climate for students. It's really important. It's really important for students to feel that they're safe, valued, supported, and celebrated. So when students are looking at the index and they're assessing climate, looking at how engaged students are on a college campus and looking at, how that sense of belonging, it's so important. And there's some things that students can do. There are questions that students can do. I always advise Black students and even all students to evaluate campus equity and inclusion. And they can do this by talking to current students, connecting with Black alumni and asking tough questions about the racial climate, reading social media posts like we mentioned, like the Black at Data. And also I suggest that they do their research and connect. Black students should connect with Black organizations on campus before they arrive on campus as well. So those are some of the things to do up front before going on a college campus.
Okay, I want to thank the three of you so much for doing this work and coming on today to tell us about it. And anything we can do to get behind what you're doing, we're here. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.